Hi, this is Mike Rounds, and I'm an authorized OSHA instructor. This video will give you the fundamentals of what it takes to be OSHA compliant and make your facility safe by OSHA standards, especially if you're concerned about passing an OSHA inspection. This program is a specially condensed version of the material in the manual How to Pass an OSHA Inspection that's available from Amazon.com, which includes why you'll be targeted for an OSHA inspection, how to prepare your facility for an OSHA inspection, what to do when an inspection occurs, the 6 steps in an OSHA inspection, practical tips for passing an OSHA inspection, OSHA rules regarding part-time and temporary workers, documentation, records OSHA will request, and a whole lot more. Throughout this video, whenever there's more detailed information, I'll refer to the manual. All you have to do to get your own copy of the manual is click on the link in the description below, and this will take you to Amazon.com's ordering site. Okay, now let's get started. Surprise! I'm an OSHA inspector, and my gift to you is a surprise inspection. So whip out your records and let's get it going. Now, why does OSHA have inspections? Well, the easy answer is because most people do what's inspected, not what's expected. Think you're about to have a really bad hair day? Not necessarily, because OSHA inspectors are not out to get you. OSHA's primary goal is to correct hazardous working conditions. Now, a couple of things you want to keep in mind. First of all, OSHA is increasing in-person inspections at all types of workplaces. And this has happened because of the second thing, and that is now that coronavirus is a recordable illness and employers are responsible for recording cases of the coronavirus. This memo came out in May of 2020. And what it did is it brought with us additional funding that OSHA needed to train and hire more inspectors, known as COSHAs. So anymore, it's not a case of if you're going to be inspected, it's a case of when. It's important that you understand that OSHA requirements and inspections are a very serious topic because workplace safety is a very serious topic. You're up against inspections, citations, and compliance schedules. And although there's an appeals process, maintaining a safe workplace is your best defense. Because OSHA knows from history that unsafe acts, unsafe equipment, and unsafe behavior are precursors to accidents and fatalities. The inspector is prepared for the inspection. They do not make it up as they go along. Regardless of the primary reason for the inspection, OSHA has a list of guidelines that they follow during an inspection, and all the details, lists, and links are available in the book. Now keep in mind that 60% of OSHA citations are performance-based standards. That means they're based on people's actions as opposed to defective products. Consider a defective extension cord as opposed to an unsafely using a ladder. 40% of the time, it's because it's unsafe. That cord is unsafe no matter what you do, say, or inspect. Okay, you cannot inspect quality into something that's defective. On the other hand, 60% of the problems that inspectors find has to do with people, for example, not using a ladder properly. In the middle case here, we've got the guy that doesn't have 3 feet above the edge, which you're supposed to have. And on the right, the guy's just standing on the ladder rather than erecting it. And if you look, the ladder is broken. Now, how does the inspector know about this stuff? Well, one is direct observation when they're there, and number 2 is reviewing records, and we'll get more into this as we go along. Keep in mind that OSHA is the law. OSHA is part of the United States Department of Labor, and the OSHA Act of 1970 mandated the creation of both agencies. It's also empowered OSHA to write regulations that carry the power of law. The Occupational Safety and Health Standards Board is responsible for adoption of the safety regulations into Title VIII, which OSHA enforces and includes minimum workplace safety requirements, injury and illness prevention program, known as the I2P2 or the IIPP. And please note that about 25% of the places that are inspected get cited and fail this because they don't have the proper documentation. The Emergency Action Plan and a Fire Prevention Plan. As you look through the OSHA rules, regulations, and guidelines, you'll discover that there are terms that are known as prescriptive terms. These are shall, must, and will. And it means you got to comply or else. Also, OSHA will generally tell you what you got to do to be compliant, but not how to do it. And everything you need or want to know about OSHA is at OSHA.gov. Here's what an inspector will usually look for in terms of citable items from the compliance codes: recognized hazards, zones of danger, employee exposure, missing items, and required documentation. The specific procedures that the OSHA inspector will follow during and after an OSHA inspection are in the manual. And in the manual, there's a link so you can download all this stuff for free if you want to know what the inspectors do to follow their guidelines. This is an example right here. These are specific procedures for during and after an OSHA inspection. And this is an example of the forms that they fill out. Once again, all these are available in the manual. Okay, so why us? We're a careful organization, so why would OSHA target us? Well, there are 6 primary reasons why OSHA will inspect your workplace. Keep in mind that OSHA inspections are initiated by surprise. So let's take a look at these 6 and what's actually involved and what you might do or not do that will cause an inspection to occur. First is imminent danger. Okay, this type of inspection is conducted when immediate death or serious harm is likely at the job. And if this kind of situation exists and an OSHA inspector known as a COSHO sees it in there, you will immediately trigger an inspection. Now, if you look down the lower right-hand corner, you'll see a construction site with the green fencing around it. That fencing is there for 2 reasons. One is to keep the gobbledygook that's being thrown up by the workers away from the public. And the second is to keep the public, specifically OSHA inspectors, from seeing what's going on inside. Because statistically, the place is a mess, and under OSHA's general rule, if there's the ability to do harm, then there is a hazard. You've got all kinds of trash laying around on the ground, broken rocks, broken equipment in there, and that's a hazard, and you don't want the OSHA inspector seeing that. Here's an example that I can give you from history. This open trench has barriers. What if it was just left open with no barriers? Would it be a danger? You bet. This open trench has no barriers. Now, when I was a kid growing up, we looked at this as a great place to play. OSHA said, no, this is a great place for people to get injured and killed. So this is why now on the streets, you see these huge steel plates when they're working on things. Used to be, back when, they would dig these ditches and then they'd put up barriers or barricades around them in the hope that people wouldn't drive into them while the crew was away. Now they don't take that chance. They put these steel plates over the top so to eliminate the imminent danger. Number 2, fatality or serious accident. This is where somebody loses a limb, like a finger, a toe, poke their eye out. Serious. COVID-19 is now considered a serious accident, and these must be reported within 8 hours, and hospitalization or limb losses within 24 hours. This accident usually prompts an immediate OSHA investigation to determine whether the employer was at fault for the accident. Now, they're not out to crucify you. The OSHA inspector is there to find out what happened, why did it happen, and what can we do to prevent it from happening again. Okay, so do know that that's going to trigger an investigation right away. The third, and this is the one that most of us are concerned about, is a complaint. OSHA has made it easy and confidential for employees to report a safety complaint. Okay, and these complaints can be reported anonymously. Do keep in mind that during an OSHA inspection, all employees, regardless of whether they're part-time, full-time, intermittent, whatever you want to call them, has the right to talk to an inspector and voice their concerns. And the Whistleblower Protection Act protects these workers from facing serious company retributions for reporting their concerns to OSHA. In the OSHA newsletter, which comes out weekly, there are innumerable cases of where employers have decided to persecute and prosecute people for blowing the whistle on safety violations. These people turned this over to OSHA, and companies are getting 6- and 7-figure fines, penalties, lawsuits, etc. You cannot prosecute somebody because unsafe is unsafe. And the fact that they turned you in, that's your fault, not theirs. This is what the OSHA complaint form looks like online. It has 6 points to it. It can be filed anonymously, and it's easy to do. Once again, details are in the book. Referral. A lot of people don't think about this, But when you have quote-unquote outsiders in your place of business, they can refer their complaints about your facility directly to OSHA. The media can also play a part in this. If they're out doing a story about an individual or your business or something of that nature, if they observe an OSHA violation and report it, plan by for an inspection. Number 5 is a programmed inspection, what we call targeted list inspections. There are certain high hazard or high risk industries, such as many manufacturing sectors, where OSHA officials frequently pursue agency investigations. And many of these organizations have higher than average rates for illness or injury, making them a serious threat for employees' safety and health. Your industry may be considered a high risk industry by OSHA. Now, what's considered a high risk industry? It has to do with what OSHA calls their site-specific targeting, or SST, inspection program. It's an industry that has a higher rate of violations per inspection. And what they do is they look at documentation. And I know statistics are not very exciting. They're kind of like watching paint dry or grass grow. But OSHA relies heavily on them. And they deal with what they call DART, days away, restricted or transferred rates for the previous calendar year. In other words, how much time off or downtime are people taking because of injuries and illnesses? You say, well, if I don't turn in the paperwork, they'll never know. Yeah, if you did not provide the required Form 300 data under the previous calendar year, they'll get you there too. Okay, so that's what determines a high-risk industry. And last but not least is follow-up. The inspection receives the lowest priority because they're following a previous inspection to ensure that all violations were addressed after the visit. For example, if they found that the existing OSHA standards for fire extinguishers weren't being met, they'll eventually return to ensure that all the necessary changes have been made. Now, it's important to understand that while the goal is to follow up on known issues, it doesn't mean OSHA won't look for new violations. While they're there, they can do what they want to. Plus, remember that it doesn't mean that the inspector is going to show up at the time that they appointed. It's on or about that date. They may come early, they may come late, because it's a surprise inspection. Okay? Now, don't forget OSHA's mantra. If it's not in writing, it never happened. You got to keep records per OSHA standards. Keeping accurate records per OSHA standards will help you during an inspection and provide you with guidance for both present and future concerns. OSHA has proven this. Keeping records makes a huge difference. So here's the 5 most important things to do to prepare for an OSHA inspection. Remember that the inspections are all conducted by surprise, but you still want to be ready at all times. First of all, you need to post the required OSHA poster in a conspicuous place where all employees are most likely to see it. These are free download from the OSHA website, which is in the book. Okay. You can download them, print them out on a color printer, and post them up on the wall. You can buy them from companies. The choice is up to you. You need to record all work-related injuries and illnesses and all qualifying injuries and illnesses on the OSHA 300 log and have the corresponding 301 forms or their equivalent handy. Okay. These need to be filed per the instructions on the forms, and you have to have them handy because the inspector will probably ask to see them. You need to implement and document a written discipline policy that provides for documenting employees' violation of company safety rules. For example, failure to wear earplugs in areas where the employer requires hearing protection. This is not just a verbal thing. This now is required to be in writing. We're looking for uniformity. You need to instruct the receptionist to notify the appropriate officials as soon as an OSHA inspector arrives. This is a big deal. Have a designated employee ready to greet and handle the OSHA inspector. Now, some examples of what the OSHA inspector might look for while examining your facility are things like broken or improperly maintained equipment, missing training records, missing instruction manuals, you name it, they can and will look for it. Please keep in mind the mantra, if it's not in writing, it never happened. OSHA can ask for over 25 types of documents. They can ask for 5 years of your OSHA 300 information. They can ask for all employees' training certificates and documentation. the names of any and all contractors and subcontractors on site, a copy of the company's safety manual, policy, or any applicable sections of the employee handbook, a copy of the company's disciplinary policy and all actions in the last 12 months, and all training documentation. And this is for full-time, part-time, or intermittent employees. The penalties for violating OSHA are predominantly, but not exclusively, cash violations. A willful violation is $5,000 to $70,000. If an employee is killed, the violation becomes a criminal offense with a minimum fine of $250,000 to $500,000 for a corporation. All the details are in the book. Now, you want to be prepared and get ahead of the problems. What we recommend is to get an independent facilities inspection by a qualified individual and fix the potential violations before OSHA arrives. Okay, there are many ways to do this. You can look in the book for all the information. Because the 3 steps to solving problems are: number 1, admit that a problem exists; number 2, develop a solution for the problem now; and number 3, implement the solution now. Don't wait. Please notice that nowhere in here does it say bitch, carp, moan, complain, or blame somebody else. You need to find out what's wrong and fix it now. In the book, there are 83 free safety checklists that you can download. If you're in doubt about whether something is safe, unsafe, needs to be modified, needs to be cleaned, fixed, replaced, whatever in there, we've got these checklists, and the links and the details are in the book. Here's an example of one of the 83 free inspection checklists to help ensure that you're in compliance with current regulations. And I want you to notice up at the top of each one, they have the reference to OSHA in red. You can choose general industry construction, whatever your industry is involved in, and you'll notice that for each one of the questions, there is an OSHA regulation listed, and you can look it up online so that you know the exact specifics of what the compliance requirements are. We're not going to leave you hanging. We want you to have everything you need to be safety, ready, and compliant. Remember that all OSHA inspections are surprise visits. There's only a handful of times when you can prepare for a specific return inspection visit. Okay, OSHA's here. Now what? I want you to think of the TV series Law and Order. Why? Well, it's been on for 20 some odd years. I know you've seen one or more episodes on it. And what OSHA does follows the guidelines that they use on Law and Order. Why? Because OSHA's the law, and Law and Order is about the same thing. The same rules and procedures apply. So the first thing is, once the inspector shows up, do I have to let him enter and inspect right now? And the answers to this are yes, no, and who cares? Okay. The answer is no, you don't. You do not have to let the inspector in right now. However, if you remember on Law and Order, when somebody shows up and says, may we come in and talk to you or come in and look at the place, and you say no, what happens is they leave and they get a warrant. They also come back with a pissed off attitude because they figure that there's something wrong or you would have let them in. The OSHA inspection, the OSHA inspector, follows the same set of guidelines. So when an inspector shows up at your door, you can restrict admittance until the appropriate management personnel are on site. That makes logical sense. If Joe is your designated OSHA inspector and Joe is not available right there, you can contact Joe in front of the inspector, find out when Joe will be back, and then make arrangements. The inspector may wait, they may come back. Okay. Number 2, determine the reason for the inspection. The inspector will tell you why they're there. Number 3, obtain a copy of the complaint. It will be in writing, and you can distinguish whether the inspection is related to safety or industrial hygiene. Now, here's how a typical inspection proceeds. The first part is the presentation of credentials. An on-site inspection begins with a presentation of the OSHA compliance officer's credentials. If you want to verify or validate these, you can contact the local OSHA office. You can find them by looking in information or online. The recommendation is that you make a copy of their stuff. What most people are doing these days, they whip out their smartphone and take a picture. Okay? There's an opening conference. The compliance officer explains why OSHA selected the workplace and lays out the process of the inspection. Then there's the walk-around, which is the actual inspection of the premises, and number 4 is the closing conference. Now, once you let the inspector in, is he free to see anything he wants? And the answer is yes and no. The answer is yes, with the exception of, and we're going to talk to you about this in just a moment, or no, you don't want him to see anything. Once again, you're going to antagonize them, and they're going to come back with a warrant, and you're going to have all kinds of problems. And if you don't agree with the results of the inspection, there's an appeals process. We'll talk more about that later on. Here is the no, and this is qualified. What about access to proprietary and security classified areas? More and more businesses these days are operating with proprietary software, hardware, processes, or something like that. Some of the stuff is government, confidential, secret, top secret. So what about these? If the OSHA inspector needs to see an area that is classified, secret, or top secret, they have to have a previously issued active government-issued security clearance, which binds them to total confidentiality. If it is company proprietary information, you may want to have them sign an NDA or a non-disclosure agreement that says under penalty of lawsuit, they cannot disclose this to anybody other than the appropriate people, and they have to keep it under wraps. Full details about the walk-around are in the manual. Now here's a quick recap. Do's and don'ts. Do be polite and respectful. Okay, I'm sure you've seen TV shows, YouTube videos, etc., about people giving a cop a bad time when they get pulled over. Not a good idea. Okay, stay calm, represent the organization well, because building good faith with the inspector could be beneficial later. Do not wait to inform the main point of contact. Okay, identify who will assist the OSHA inspector and make sure that they're the ones handling the situation. Okay, do ask for the officer's credentials. Okay, ask for their credentials, take down important information. Like I said, what a lot of people now are doing is taking a photo with their phone. Don't volunteer information. Think about law and order when they put somebody on the stand. If the inspector doesn't ask for it, don't say it and answer only the question being asked at the time. Don't embellish. Somebody asks a question and you can say no, but on alternate Tuesdays, don't start going into that kind of situation. You don't want to do that. Do's and don'ts of an OSHA inspection. Do answer the question factually. When asked a question, answer it to the best of your ability. Avoid judgmental comments. Somebody says, have you ever seen anybody using a broken ladder? You say, yes. Okay. Unless they ask for clarification on it, don't volunteer it. And for God's sakes, whatever you do, don't leave the inspector alone. Have a representative stay with the inspector for the duration of their time. Pay attention to the inspector. If they take a picture, you take a picture as well. Okay, very important component. You don't want to be blindsided. Do expect a closing conference or comments. Okay, during this conference, the inspector will report their findings, take good notes, and immediately transmit these notes to the Office for Records. Once again, because of the prevalence of smartphones, we really recommend that you either video the whole thing or at least turn on the audio recorder. Don't immediately hand over documents. Don't volunteer anything. If the inspector asks for a document, ask him to submit a document request, forms are in the book, and record which documents are requested. Make a copy for yourself and your records as well so that you know what you're dealing with. And here's some more of the stuff that the inspector might look and ask for. Okay? Remember, if it's not in writing, it never happened. So OSHA is great about asking for stuff in writing. So you want to make sure that the person assigned to accompany the OSHA inspector knows where and how to access the organization's records. The Injury and Illness Prevention Program, or I2P2, remember that 25% of inspection organizations fail this part. So you got to know where to get a hold of the I2P2 right on demand. They can ask for 3 to 5 years of Form 300 and 301 to make sure that the injury and illness incident report and the summary of work-related injuries and illnesses is up to date. Okay. They can take a look at training documentation. It's not good enough to say that you've trained all of your people. You need documentation. Unmarked containers. This is an easy one if you're doing a walk-around. If a container is not labeled, it may be considered an OSHA violation, and the inspector may require that it be disposed of immediately. Okay. There are OSHA-approved peel and stick labels that can be put on what's known as secondary containers. For example, if you're getting cleaning solution in 5-gallon buckets, and people want to use it in a handheld spray. So they put it in a secondary container. The secondary container must be labeled properly. And these peel and stick labels are dirt cheap. They're just a few cents a piece. And you can fill in the information, and now you've got something that OSHA will not throw out. Flammable and combustible liquids. OSHA looks around for this kind of stuff. These are bad news. Missing signs. Okay. Look around your facility and take a look, for example, at fire extinguishers. Look at where all the fire extinguishers are at and see if there's a sign, large, red and white, and visible from across the room to tell people where the fire extinguisher is at. Safety data sheets not easily accessed by employees. Okay, if you have to hunt for this, or, oh, it's in a file cabinet someplace in the storage room, we don't know where it's at, you'll get cited for that. You have to have these readily available. The safety data sheets for each extinguishing agent should be available in the workplace. Employees need to know what's in the extinguisher because there are different classes of fires, and you don't want them grabbing the wrong fire extinguisher. Block safety exits. The classic argument for this is, well, it was only for a few minutes. During that few minutes is when fires occur. Unsanitary working conditions. This is the problem with construction sites. They tend to be unsanitary. They don't clean up immediately after themselves. So the unsanitary means it's dangerous. This is particularly dangerous in this photograph. General requirements on wiring methods. We're seeing more and more of this stuff as an OSHA inspector comes in. They don't just go through the plant. They go through the office section in here. We have the improper use of multi-tap, strips, etc. They're overloaded. Okay? We need to have adequate numbers of properly rated outlets. Okay? General requirements for electrical. If you've got electrical conduit points like this one in the photograph right now, you need to have them marked off so that they don't block this stuff. The general requirements for walking and working surfaces, they've got to be clean, organized, and this is an exit area. They can't be blocking anything. PPE, this has become a very big issue since COVID. More and more people are aware of it. Nevertheless, we find that people don't wear their PPE when they're supposed to. Ergonomic concerns, one of the latest. Of course, we're all familiar with the improper lifting technique, lift with your legs and not with your back. OSHA also looks for other things like non-ergonomic chairs, tools that put people at risk of injuries, etc. And evidence of smoking. Now, California in particular has gone so far as to eliminate smoking from the workplace, and I'm sure other states have as well. And we have state, federal, and local laws that govern issues relating to drugs, alcohol, and smoking in the workplace. If the inspector sees any evidence of this, they will cite you for it. Okay? Now, as we finish up here, remember the 83 free safety checklists that are in the book. We really recommend that you get them and download them, and then you don't have to kill yourself trying to comply with everything in one day. What we recommend that you do is you go through the lists and you pick the ones that you think are applicable to your facility. You download those, and one a day, one every other day or something like that, you go through the plant and you make a list of all the things that are wrong. This has been Mike Rounds. I'd like to thank you. If you need more information, you can go to OSHAbyrounds.com.